Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at the Red Sea incident, Exodus chapters 13 through 15, in our continuing study of the book of Exodus. Bruce Waltke describes the Exodus event in terms of the birth of a baby. He looks at the supernatural growth of the child in the womb of Egypt as Israel is in Egypt, beginning with just 70 people and then growing into a mighty nation. Then we have the supernatural preservation of the child in the womb of Egypt as Egypt tries to perform an abortion and tries to kill the child that is growing within her. Then there is the supernatural birth of the child from the womb of Egypt. That's the birth narrative that we're looking at now as they're going to be supernaturally delivered through the Red Sea. And then following that will come the supernatural protection of the child once the child's been born in the wilderness. Exodus 13 verses 1 through 10 give us the Passover ordinance. We already looked at that, in which Moses says, "You shall tell your son on that day, it's because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt." You're going through that ordinance. But then there's another ordinance. There's an ordinance of the redemption of the firstborn, in which he says, "It shall be when your son asks you in time to come, saying, 'What is this?' then you'll say to him, 'With a powerful hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery, and he redeemed Israel. And so they are to buy back the firstborn.'" All children that are to be born, whether animals or even people, are purchased back from the Lord, to remember that they were all at one time under sentence of death, but God redeemed them, God saved them, God passed over through the death of an innocent substitute. And we looked at that last time in the ordinance of the Passover. Exodus 13:17, "Now when Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, even though it was near, for God said the people might change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt." Notice he did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines. That's not the way they went. The way of the land of the Philistines was that way that went along the coast road, and that's the way people normally went to and from Egypt. They took that coast road up through Canaan and all the way up to Mesopotamia. But we're going to see they didn't go that way. Instead, God led the people around by the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea, and the sons of Israel went up in martial array from the land of Egypt. So notice they went up by the Red Sea. Now that word Red Sea, Yam is a word for sea. The Red Sea is Yam Suf, and it doesn't actually have the color red in it. It's actually, literally, it means the Sea of Reeds. The Sea of Reeds. Now because of that, people have puzzled over, well, what's the Sea of Reeds? And there's a sort of a popular theory out there that has the Israelites going through what today is called the Bitter Lakes, is marshy reeds, and that they just sort of waded across these sort of swampy areas, and the Pharaoh with his chariots tried to cross, but they got stuck in the mud, and there they stay, and it's not really God parting the Red Sea, but rather he just leads them through the Red Sea. Well, that's not true. That's not true at all. And the reason we know it's not true is because elsewhere in the Bible, we read of Solomon building a fleet of ships on the Reed Sea. You see, the Reed Sea is what we call today, the Red Sea. It's the same body of water. There's another theory, it came out back in I think it was in the late 1960s, that had the Egyptians crossing over a narrow sort of a sandbar that juts out into the Mediterranean. But remember, that's the way of the Philistines, and we're specifically told they didn't go that way. That's not the route that they took. The traditional route has them beginning to leave. They actually go out a bit into the wilderness, but then make a big turn and come back, and then they cross the upper portion, the northern portions of the Red Sea. And I think the tradition is there for a reason. I think it's correct. And we're going to see the path described in just a minute. But I also ought to address one more theory. It's a more recent theory that has the Israelites going all the way down to the end of the Sinai Peninsula, and then crossing at what's today called the Gulf of Aqaba, part of the Red Sea still, and into Arabia. And I think that theory is wrong too, but for different reasons. First of all, the area where they'd be crossing is about 200 feet below sea level. They'd have to take their mountain climbing gear. But beyond that, just making the route down there, they're not going to have enough time to do that. You see, Exodus chapter 13, verse 19, Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, God will surely take care of you, and you shall carry my bones from here with you. And so the way Genesis had ended was with this promise where Joseph said, make sure you take my body, my bones with you. And now it's 400 years later, and they're doing that. And then we're told when they set out from Sukkoth and camped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. So they leave Sukkoth, that's there by that delta region, and they camp by Etham, that area that's just outside of it's nowhere near the Nile River, so that now they left Egypt, they're on the edge of the wilderness. And we read that the Lord was going before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them on the way, and a pillar of fire by night to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. And so he's leading them out into the wilderness with his presence going with them. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, tell the sons of Israel to turn back. You left Egypt, but now turn back and camp before Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. Migdol means fortress. Between Migdol and the sea. And you shall camp in front of Baal-Zephon, opposite by it, by the sea, for Pharaoh will say of the sons of Israel, they're wandering aimlessly in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. You see, they're to go out. They leave Sukkoth. They came to Etham. And then they're to circle around to come back and camp by the sea. So that when reports get back to the Pharaoh, gee, which way did they go? And the reports come back to them, it's going to sound like they're going in circles. They don't even know how to get out of Egypt. Here they are by the shores of the Red Sea. Now, they left on the 14th of Nisan. That's the day on which the Passover is going to be. That's the going out term. And by the 15th of the second month, that's only 30 days later, they will set out from Elim to come to the wilderness of Sin. They'll already have crossed by that time. So between the 14th of Nisan and the 15th of the second month, within that 30 days, they're going to have to leave Egypt, turn back, look like they're going in circles, settled by Baal-Zephon. The Pharaoh's going to have to hear what happened. He's going to have to gather his army. He's going to come and chase them. They're going to cross through the Red Sea. He'll follow them through the Red Sea, but he won't be allowed to continue. The Red Sea will close and drown him. They'll go into the wilderness of Shur. They'll go 3 days without water. They'll come to Marah. They'll sweeten the waters. They'll leave Marah, and they'll come to Elim on the 30th day of the second month, which is not enough time to do all that and still cross the Red Sea and then be over in what today is Saudi Arabia. So that long route, they just don't have enough time to do that. They'd still be crossing, unless maybe they had 10-speed bicycles or something like that. And so I reject that longer route. Instead, what we see, like we said, 15th of the second month, they'll have already crossed the Red Sea, and now they're going to come to, and they'll been through a place called Marah, and they'll come down from Elim to come to the wilderness of Sin, where the Sinai is, that southern part of the Sinai. And then just to give you the rest of the chronology, in the third month, they'll finally arrive in the wilderness of the Sinai, the wilderness of Sin. Now, it's not sin like sinfulness, it's sin like Sinai. And then in the first month of the second year, a whole year later, they'll finally erect the tabernacle. They'll get the law, and they'll get the instructions for the tabernacle, and then the tabernacle will be built. And Exodus chapter 40 is going to be in the second year when that finally takes place. Now, but we're not there yet. Exodus chapter 14, verse 5, when the king of Egypt was told the people had fled, Pharaoh and his servants had a change of heart toward the people, and they said, what is this that we've done? that we've let Israel go without serving us. So he made his chariot ready and took his people with him, and he took 600 select chariots. Now that's like taking your armored corps. This is the most advanced form of weaponry that they had in the world. And he took 600 select chariots and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. And he goes out and he's going to chase down the Israelites with the most advanced form of weaponry that there was in the world, an entire corps of chariots. And then the Egyptians chased after them with all the horses and the chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, and they overtook them camping by the sea by Pi-Hahiroth in front of Baal-Zephon. As Pharaoh drew near, the sons of Israel looked, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they became very frightened. So the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord. And then they said to Moses, "Is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you've taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt with us in this way, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, 'Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians'? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." How quickly they change their tune. But Moses said to the people, "Do not fear. Stand by and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you will never see them again forever. The Lord will fight for you while you keep silent." And sure enough, the angel of the Lord, who had been going before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and there was the cloud along with the darkness, and yet it gave light at night. Thus the one did not come near the other all night. And so God separates the Egyptians from attacking, and then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord swept by the sea. And notice what God uses. I mean, it's not a giant hand coming down from heaven, but rather he swept the sea back by a strong east wind. It's the wind that divided the sea. Notice it blew all night and turned the sea into dry land, so the waters were divided. The sons of Israel went through the midst of the sea on dry land, and the waters were like a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. But that doesn't mean it's not this narrow corridor like has been sometimes pictured in the movies where they go through in single file. No. They're going through en masse. It's a big, wide area. We call this tidal surge. Sometimes we get this when a hurricane either makes the waters go up, or in this case they made the waters go down. The wind is what divided the waters. And then the Egyptians took up pursuit, and all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, his horsemen went in after them into the midst of the sea. At the morning watch the Lord looked down on the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and the cloud, and brought the army of the Egyptians into confusion. And so we read that he caused their chariot wheels to swerve, and he made them drive with difficulty. And then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may come back over the Egyptians, over their chariots and their horsemen." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned. The tidal surge goes away, the wind stops, and all of a sudden the waters come back. And it's not necessarily they come back in this giant tidal wave, but they rise and they rise and rise. And the Egyptians were fleeing right into it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. It rises faster than they can move, and of course they're already stuck. And before you know it, the army of the Egyptians has drowned in the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, even Pharaoh's entire army that had gone into the sea after them. Not even one of them remained. Now what we have next is the same story, yet told this time in a song. So it's poetic, not to be taken with rigid literalism, because poetry is like that. It has the refrain where God says, not once, but repeatedly, the Pharaoh's horse and rider he has cast into the sea. And figurative language is used throughout the song, so that, like we said, the horse and its rider, he's hurled, he's cast into the sea. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters were piled up. And again, we don't necessarily take that literally. It wasn't, a big nose didn't come down and blow its nose on it. You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them up. That's figurative language. In other words, it's depicting the way that God destroyed the armies of the Pharaoh.